The Indian Removal Act, the law that forced tens of thousands of Native people from their homes, passed the U.S. House of Representatives by one single vote. Not a landslide, not a mandate, just one vote. How did one narrow vote in Washington turn into a death march that killed thousands of people? Textbooks give you the vote and the outcome, but skip everything in between. Today, we're going back into that gap. Here's the setup. In the early 1800s, the Cherokee Nation lived across what's now Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Alabama. They weren't wandering hunters in the way settlers imagined. Many Cherokee families ran farms, ran mills, printed newspapers in their own written language. They had a constitution modeled partly on the one in Washington, and white settlers wanted their land anyway. This story matters because it set the template for how the United States would treat Native nations for the next 100 years. If stories like this, the ones that don't make it into a textbook paragraph, are the reason you're here, this is exactly what this channel is built on. Hit subscribe so the next one finds you. Now back to Georgia, where this story really starts to turn. Let's start with something that surprises people. By the 1820s, the Cherokee Nation had already adapted on their own terms to a lot of what civilization meant to white Americans. They had a syllabary, a full writing system, invented by a Cherokee man named Sequoyah around 1821. They published a bilingual newspaper, the Cherokee Phoenix. Some Cherokee families, especially wealthier ones, even held enslaved black people, mirroring the economy of their white neighbors. This wasn't a culture frozen in time waiting to be discovered. It was a nation actively negotiating its survival in a world closing in around it. That complexity matters because it breaks the simple story of primitive people versus modern invaders. The Cherokee weren't fighting to stay the same. They were fighting to stay at all. Then, in 1828, gold turned up in the hills of North Georgia. Suddenly, the land wasn't just fertile, it was valuable in a new way. Georgia's government began pressuring Washington to open Cherokee land for white settlement. The Cherokee Nation fought back the only way they legally could, in court. And in 1832, the U.S. Supreme Court actually ruled in their favor. In Worcester, Georgia, the court said Georgia had no authority over Cherokee land, that the Cherokee Nation was a distinct political community with its own sovereignty. It should have been a turning point in their favor, but it wasn't. President Andrew Jackson, according to a story historians still debate the exact wording of, essentially said the court could enforce its own ruling if it wanted to, because he wasn't going to. Whether or not he said it in those exact words, the outcome was real. The ruling was ignored. The highest court in the country had backed the Cherokee, and it changed nothing on the ground. That betrayal opened the door to what came next. In 1835, a small faction of Cherokee leaders, not the elected national government, not the majority, signed a treaty at New Echota agreeing to give up all Cherokee land east of the Mississippi in exchange for money and land out west. The Cherokee Nation's own principal chief, John Ross, hadn't authorized it. Most Cherokee people never agreed to it, but the US government treated it as binding. Historians still argue about how legitimate that treaty really was, but the men who signed it knew exactly how dangerous it was. Cherokee law at the time made ceding tribal land without authority a capital crime. Several of the signers would later be assassinated by their own people for it, years after the removal. So by 1838, the US Army moved in. Soldiers rounded up Cherokee families, sometimes at gunpoint, sometimes giving them only minutes to gather belongings, and held them in crowded stockades before marching them roughly 800 miles west to what's now Oklahoma. This is the part most people picture when they hear Trail of Tears, but here's the number that stops people cold. Historians estimate that somewhere between 4,000 and 8,000 Cherokee people died from disease, exposure, starvation, and exhaustion, out of a nation of around 16,000 forced to travel. That's roughly 1 in 4. Some historians even use the word genocide to describe it, though the term is debated depending on whether intent to destroy the Cherokee people specifically can be proven, versus a policy that was reckless and deadly but not explicitly designed to kill. And here's a detail that complicates the story further. Not every Cherokee person made that march. Several hundred Cherokee people evaded removal entirely by hiding in the mountains of western North Carolina, protected in part by a white landowner named William Holland Thomas, who had been adopted into the tribe and used legal loopholes to help them stay. Their descendants are the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, still living on tribal land in North Carolina today. Meanwhile, some of the wealthier Cherokee families who did make the journey brought enslaved black people with them on the same forced march, reminding us that oppression and complicity could exist inside the same story, inside the same wagon train, at the same time. The removal wasn't just Cherokee either. The Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole nations were forced through similar removals around the same years. Together, they're sometimes called the 5 civilized tribes, a term rooted in the very assimilation pressure that failed to save any of them from expulsion. So what happened to the Cherokee Nation after they arrived in Indian Territory? They rebuilt. They re-established a government, schools, a newspaper. Today, the Cherokee Nation is the largest tribal nation in the United States by enrolled population, headquartered in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, with hundreds of thousands of citizens. The Eastern Band still holds land in the Appalachian Mountains. Their ancestors refuse to leave. The language Sequoyah wrote down 2 centuries ago is being taught in immersion schools right now to kids trying to keep it alive. So back to that one vote. In 1830, the Indian Removal Act passed the House by a margin so thin that a handful of different minds could have changed everything. It's a strange thing to sit with, that a policy which reshaped the map of a continent and ended thousands of lives came down to a count barely wider than a coin flip. History likes to feel inevitable looking backward. It rarely felt that way at the time. If this story made you wonder what happened to the other nations forced along their own trails, the Choctaw, the Creek, the Seminole, who fought back with guerrilla war for years, that's a story for another day. We're telling those stories too, one nation at a time, with the same care we tried to bring to this one. If you want to be there when we do, subscribe now. It genuinely helps this kind of history reach more people.